Hey Pete, thank you for coming in. I just love your background. I mean, you're like a drummer. You got this sort of cultural, sort of media, music background. You have this great educational background as well. I mean, this foreign nations. I mean, what have you not done? It's kind of like that, right? So definitely a sort of plethora of interests and wide contributions. But thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with my audience.
Well, Stephen, it's a true pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Pete, one of the things that, and my audience, by the way, I should mention, I actually track, for example, when I do a LinkedIn post, and literally the top five positions of people watching are it's founder, a CEO, co-founder, president, board member, and then I get into like professor, software developer, things like that. But and within that top 10, there's like managing directors and things like that of venture capital or financial services and so on. So it's a pretty broad audience, but it tends to skew executives. But I always get this question with people I interview, and that is, you got this amazing background, including 2024 Rising Star in VC by Venture Capital Journal. I think it's just kind of amazing. Um, but what were the things that were the inflection points in your life? And it could have been something that when you were 3 or 5, or inside, outside the family, or in school, outside of school, something in the job. Maybe those three inflection points that created this wonderful career you have and a wonderful contributor.
They say many roads lead to Rome. For me, many roads have led to where I am today. A few that come to mind, I am a beneficiary of creative DNA. My grandmother is 103 years old, and she is still making sculptures in the woods of Michigan. And as a young boy, she gave me a drum set that she had found at a garage sale. And that ignited in me a lifetime in the arts and the creative world. While today I stand as a venture capitalist, my training world of a rock band. And that is how today I think about company building the same way that my band went from a garage act in Chicago to performing all over the world. I am a beneficiary of that arts DNA. So inflection one, when my grandmother gave me a drum set and made me a drummer. I also today have a guiding light, a guiding principle that opportunities come from unexpected places. The second inflection was an unexpected moment. The band Filiger was on tour in Austin, Texas, and playing a festival, South by Southwest. After the show, out of nowhere, a lady came up, said, "Hey, I work for the U.S. Department of State. Love the show. Would you all be interested in representing American music abroad?" From that unexpected exchange, the band was sent to Azerbaijan, then Russia, then Kuwait, then pockets of the Middle East, back to Russia again, South America. And that was inflection two, because today I am a venture capitalist, laser focused on US interest, US development. And it was because of that unexpected exchange that I really learned about the world, developed an interest in critical areas of US technology. And that was all a spontaneous moment, an inflection point that led me to where I am today. The last one that comes to mind is what really lit the fire for me in venture capital. I told you about what lit the fire for me as a drummer and as a creative entrepreneurial person. But as an investor, it was really when I was given a shot at a student fellowship at a venture fund in Boston. And I had the chance through the fellowship to source companies. Sourcing companies is the crown jewel of venture capital in a lot of ways. And through that fellowship from 406, when I sat across from founders building companies, especially at the early stages, I felt that this person on the other side of the table had the same creative entrepreneurial sensibilities that I had, but in a wildly different sector. And so I began to understand that really young companies, young-blooded companies with co-founder or two or three resemble in so many ways a band, a small group that might be writing indie rock, but it's similarly trying to find product market fit. It's similarly trying to scale an audience. It's similarly dealing with life in front of an audience. And so I really had a click. That was a click for me where it felt like an accumulation of a lot of background. So it was the three moments that led, like I said, in many different ways to where I am today, getting a drum set, getting exposure to US development as a cultural ambassador, and finding click in venture capital as something that I actually have a knack for.
And you mentioned your grandmother is over 100, and she is still, I would imagine, keenly interested in everything you do. What does she think about your turn into venture capital? And she must be just joyful of this sort of journey you had from Drumstick to State Department to venture capital.
Well, here's a fact for you. My grandmother is older than venture capital, and not by a little, but by a lot. Venture capital, its cradle in the 1960s with American Research Development Company. That's young enough to be my grandmother's daughter. So venture capital is a very young business, and when I talk to my grandmother about venture capital, I don't call it venture capital. I tried that, and she was perplexed. Oh, what is that? What I realized she could understand is that I work with inventors and I back inventors. Inventors is a word that feels like we've had forever. And it's a word that she can understand because she was born not too long after the Wright brothers invented airplanes. She was born the year that people invented Band-Aids, and she saw the invention of so many different things across her lifetime. The computer, the internet, all of these things. And so she gets that. If I say I work with inventors, she gets that. And because she is a creative, she considers herself too a inventor in some way. So that makes sense to her. And if I said I was just a finance guy, I think her heart would be broken in many ways. Because again, she's the one that gave me a drum set, but she knows that when I talk about collaborating with inventors, working with inventors, it puts a smile to her face. So she is deeply, deeply proud.
So it sounds like you still maintain ties with the U.S. Department of State and the friends that you fostered during that time when you were touring and so on.
Absolutely. We are in an extraordinary moment where innovation and government have deep ties and deep shared interests. I look at the moment where we are today the same way that as a historian I would look at the period after the New Deal with FDR. The New Deal was something in today's dollars around 870 billion of investment. And today we really feel the New Deal in our lives. Think about the Hoover Dam. We still see the Hoover Dam. Think about LaGuardia Airport. LaGuardia Airport is still running. Think about the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. That is still going. So today, we still feel and we still see and we still rely on outcomes of that government investment. Now today, and this might blow your mind a bit, but when you look at recent government legislations, the Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, that total spend is around 3.7 trillion. So the New Deal, which we still feel today, an investment of 870 billion versus today investments of nearly 4 trillion. We have invested 4.5 new deals, 4.5 times the amount of new deals into critical areas of American life. And so I keep deep ties to the government, whether it's the State Department, whether it's other agencies, because I know that there's a strong alignment in invigorating, empowering the pillars of American interest and American development. And in that sense, some of the greatest attributes that the world has. And so I certainly stay close, not just for the personal affinity and appreciation for the U.S. government, but also the conviction as an investor that financial interests will align with country level interest over the next century.
So it's interesting, so going back to your story arc, and you have this interest in the arts, and so and it's triggered by the catalytic moment, which your grandmother giving you these journals and things like that, right? So, and then you go on into high school and university, and you get an AB, magna cum laude from Dartmouth College. You got an MPA from Harvard University, and you're a graduate of Oxford as well, right? Distinguished graduate of Oxford, with an MBA. That educational background, what caused you to, choose those schools and those particular areas of study? And you did very, very well. So can you describe that experience as a student?
More so than venture capital confusing my grandmother, more so than that was the confusion that she had when I told her I was going to go study American history in the United Kingdom. That I would go to across the pond to understand American development. So why in the world would you ever go to Oxford to study American history? I first believe strongly that education is a national treasure that we have here, and it's also one of the greatest gifts that anyone can get. And I have been given that gift time and time again, and taken it seriously every time. So part of my academic life is the outcome of gratitude for those opportunities. So at those places, the second I showed up at the door, in some cases, I went to the library just because I really cherished the chance to study at those places. So that's point one. Just when given the opportunity, I would take it because I appreciate how important it is. Thematically, I'm from the Midwest of the United States, and I have a deep curiosity about American history, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's a complex history. And all throughout, I have been trying to make myself smarter on that history. So at Dartmouth, I studied ancient history, classics. This is Greece and this is Rome. And that period of humanity became some of the software programming of the United States. We embedded many of the codes, literally the legal codes from those places, into the United States laws and institutions. So I studied classics because I really wanted to get a good grip on modern American history. And when I went to Oxford, I studied early American history and did so in the UK because I think you learn a lot more about yourself when you talk to someone else than when you talk to yourself. And it's just like a patient can't self-diagnose themselves. A really rounded student of history can't understand its own development without talking to other folks. So we could talk quite a while about how Brits see American history, but I really put the exclamation point on my American history training, studying modern government, and that's where the Kennedy School really gave me a chance to understand the present. I had studied ancient history, studied really early American history at Oxford, and then at Kennedy School, brought it to the present.
So I can see this arc, right? You get this music sort of interest, and you do this gig with the U.S. Department of State, and you're now a member of the Council for Foreign Relations. So that there's that kind of aspect to you. You got this really interesting educational background, and you did this. You were like a student fellow of 406 Venture, so you got this feeling for venture. Can you now describe that whole venture arc initially, and then we'll go sort of to the present. So,
yes. So I today believe that venture capital is a pillar of American interest, development. Some might even say power. Some of the greatest things we have today were enabled by folks that were comfortable backing ideas, people with ideas. So 406 Ventures, that was really, that fellowship was what on paper looks like the beginning. But spiritually, for me, there was a long-term interest in American innovation. And people forget that the founding fathers, or those that created the Declaration of Independence, that they themselves were entrepreneurs. One of them started a bank, the other one started a law firm, the other one started a brewery. So we have a lot of good things that have come about because in this country we celebrate the entrepreneur. We celebrate people who go from 0 to 1 to 100. We also embrace failure, which is hugely important. The fact that we have a bankruptcy act in the 19th century was a big deal because we suddenly said, if you fail at your idea, you're not a bad person. So before I jumped into 406 and tell you the paper resume story, it's a spiritual interest with venture that I really embrace. So 406 Ventures, that was a student fellowship. People always ask, they always want to know, how do you break into VC? Well, one great way is to find a firm that you can help. So I started sourcing companies for them as a student fellow, and that then introduced me to what, as I said, was a crown jewel of venture, which is finding companies. I went then to a very sophisticated group in Europe called Bertelsmann and joined their investments team, their corporate venture group. And this was my exposure to international venture. I lived in Europe, in Berlin, and shortly after was sent to Beijing and China to learn about those startup ecosystems, to help the startups building in those places, and that helped shape my my investment thinking in so many ways. And then a little over 2 years ago, had the good fortune to join Alumni Ventures, which is one of the most active venture funds on the planet. It is an extraordinary story of entrepreneurship in and of itself. It services over 10,000 LPs, retail investors, and gives them diversified portfolios. And I just feel very, very fortunate to be where I am today. I always say venture capital is a really, really hard job to get, and it's an even harder job to keep. So I am waking up every single day trying to keep this job by doing my best.
So what excites you in terms of innovation in startups? What are the things that are you looking for currently? And then where do you see this trending?
I came back just last night from the Idaho National Laboratories, which is where the United States has historically done much of its nuclear energy development. And when I think about where we are today, and more importantly, where we are headed, power is one of the great new innovation frontiers. Here's a basic way to get a handle on this. When we go on Google and we query, the amount of energy that takes is about 18 seconds of light bulb time. Could power a 60-watt light bulb for about 18 seconds when you Google something. When you go on ChatGPT and you query on ChatGPT, the query consumes enough energy to power a 60-watt light bulb for about 10 minutes. So when you look at the amount of energy requirements from this new novel behavior, you are looking at an extraordinary stress on a very important asset. And what is that asset? The asset happens to be the biggest and oldest machine in the world. And the biggest and oldest machine in the world is the US electrical grid. When an investor looks at old and undisrupted, they oftentimes see market opportunity. And the electric grid that Edison started on Pearl Street, in the 1800s or so, is simply not prepared for the amount of energy that is required. So I point towards, as a theme, power as one of great investment and interest. But more specifically, areas that can deliver industrial grade power. And that narrows down to areas like nuclear energy. So nuclear energy, and we can talk more about that, is one where, among others, I have quite a bit of interest. Another is productivity. I look at where we are in the world today, and there's so many things that actually are holding us back in terms of productivity. First is just population aging and population decline. If you look at Germany, if you look at Japan, half of those populations are over 50. If you look at the United States, we're getting up there too. But we also have plenty of countries in the world that are actually declining in terms of population. China is losing every single year about the population of Las Vegas. So China is losing people. And so when you look at productivity and you say, hey, we're kind of running uphill a little bit here, where are we going to get efficiencies? That's where I, as an investor, get really excited about very specific areas, such as infrastructure AI, separate from generative AI, but infrastructure AI, semiconductors, and quantum computing. I know that that's an area that you know a heck of a lot about, but I think about productivity. So power, productivity, and probably the last one is what I call protection, but really most people would call security, defense. And this is really about novel ways to secure life. And this is a challenging one, and we can talk a little bit more about, but is certainly one where there's been a lot of attention on it. So you asked about trends. Power is a big one. Productivity is a big one. And what I call protection is a big one as well.
On the power, then, are you looking at sort of small modular nuclear reactors, new kind of like salt-based reactors, molten salt, or sort of alternative ways of doing nuclear energy? Are you looking at fusion reactors and the different kinds of fusion containment and where that's going? Are you also interested in some of the battery kind of technologies as well, because it's related to power? So
I love to call this a D, all of the above strategy. So it's multiple choice. It's not A, it's not B, it's not C, it's not D, it's all of the above. It's not just fission, it's not just fusion. It's not just within fusion, the small modular reactors or the micro reactors or the light water reactors or the advanced reactors. It's D, it's all of the above. Because again, going to the underlying macroeconomic challenge, and energy resilience is not a single set solution. Resilience implies diversification, and so looking at all the above. So yes, actively have made investments in fusion, have made investments in fission. The underlying thesis actually has more to do with talent than technology. We are seeing right now a fascinating talent trend where bright founders trained in Silicon Valley agile engineering principles are pairing up with the founders with deep atomic acumen, very smart on nuclear, and they're coming together and they're starting teams to build. And this is one of the newest, most underappreciated, least understood trends in innovation right now, that you are having these extraordinarily bright minds show up in places like Idaho Falls, Idaho, or in outside of Albuquerque and Los Alamos, and they're building companies in nuclear energy. And so we can talk about the business models, the underlying business models, challenging category. But for me, the greatest asset of an early stage company is the management. And whether it's fission or whether it's fusion, whether it's any variation of subsets within each, and there are many, you'd be amazed. Even within fusion, you've got the stellarators and other fusion models that themselves compete, and then fusion competes quite a bit with the fission folks. But I look at it from a more of a portfolio perspective and say, I want to back the best teams, because in the end, they all share the same goal. They're trying to deliver energy at the lowest kilowatt hour, dollar per kilowatt hour. So that's how I think about it.
Do you investigate some of these outlier exotic energy schemes that are out there, with its kind of zero energy aspects? Or...
Again, it's all of the above. Investigate is probably the perfect word. I see my job sometimes more like a investigative journalist who goes out and turns over rocks, and finds facts and tries to form a view based on that. And so when folks say, "Oh, zero-based energy," yeah, I'll take that call any day. And I have, and I'll only say that there are remarkable minds, dedicated minds, not just founders, operators who are really working hard to solve the energy challenges. I said I just came back from Idaho National Labs. You would be amazed at the people in those laboratories who are quietly, but in dedicated manners, trying to make the planet healthier and happier, but are working on very precise, specific tasks. And that really inspires me too, that they're not just in this for shiny stages and pitches, but actually the day-to-day in the trenches, company building.
You talked about productivity. So, productivity could be acceleration of discovery. DeepMind just released AlphaFold 3, which can do investigative things with the ligands and DNA and RNA together with proteins, right? So it's a really remarkable burst of innovation, and things that really wasn't commercially feasible. It's now feasible using these breakthroughs in AI machine learning and applying different aspects of these large foundation models. So that in a way can accelerate scientific productivity, innovation productivity. And then you can get workforce productivity by the use of these different kinds of technologies. You can getting into amazing breakthroughs using some kind of combination of exascale supercomputing with, I would say, analog computing, which is getting more mainstream again. It's really old, but people are realizing that maybe there's some capabilities there, but these hybrid systems that combine exascale supercomputing or data centers with that kind of capability, maybe some analog computing, quantum-inspired computing, and then quantum computing itself, and marrying that with AI and machine learning. So, and I think a good example of Microsoft quantum elements, I was just fascinated when they applied it to, working on new batteries, right? So they investigated 32 million new novel materials and came up with one, and they believe they can get a 70% improvement from an efficiency standpoint in the use of lithium and things like that. So, and then you talk semiconductors, and semiconductors can be these sort of nanoscale kind of semiconductors from a foundry standpoint, I guess they're going sub 2 nanometers now, and maybe even below that. a 3 seems to be kind of more mainstream, or you can get these semiconductors that are on the edge that have AI embedded in them. And, everybody's excited about Apple to see what's going to happen, because are they going to try to shrink this into something like it's on a phone? You get the Blackwell from NVIDIA, which 208 billion transistors. But my iPhone has a A17 Bionic chip, and it has it can do 33 trillion operations per second. I mean, it's like a supercomputer in your hand, right? So that all of that chip technology is going through the roof as well, right? I mean,
Yes.
so what are your views on all of that in terms of productivity, and kind of what other things are you looking for?
Yeah. Orienting again myself towards history, when we look at agriculture in the United States in 1800, we had something like 40 million farm workers. Today in the United States, we have about 2 million farm workers. So technology has been the great force of change for how we spend our time. And I look for that level of seismic change in people, in processes. And when I look at the semiconductors as one example, the first place that I start is with country level considerations. And so when I think about the hegemony, especially in the smaller nanometer size chips of TSMC, this then becomes a forcing function to look at how in the United States, not only can we build these competencies, but also resiliency. It's not just about can we do the thing, it's are we sufficiently diversified in it? And so I like you talking about analog and how that's making a comeback. People forget how much the world still runs on analog, including chip production. And so made a recent investment I can't talk too much about, but just in analog, in design, using the AI for analog chip designs, which sounds a little bit backwards. I mean, it's sort of like saying, hey, I just discovered this really cool music called jazz. I mean, we've had jazz for a long time. It's not new, it's not novel, and analog isn't either. But there's just so many new ways to do old things, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I do these keynotes and I talk about a double exponential rate of innovation. Do you think it's accelerating at that point? It's like a vertical line.
Yeah. Well, one essential attribute that I've learned in ventures is humility, and to go to the experts when you don't know as much. I would put that question back at you, Stephen, because I think you're about as bright of a mind as it comes. To whether the rate is increasingly increasing or increasingly decreasing. But it certainly doesn't seem to have any sign of stoppage anytime soon.
There's this double compounding impact that's happening because of all of the consolidation and the aggregation of everything coming together. And it used to be that people used to be in silos, but now there's a realization you have to be multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, when you're looking at fission reactors and you're getting scientists working with engineers that are in a totally different discipline, but they're not they have to, right?
They have to.
And it's becoming transdisciplinary. So it's gone from multi-stakeholder to multidisciplinary to transdisciplinary, kind of the amalgamation of all of these things to solve problems. You can't do it in silos anymore. So, and because of that convergence, then I see this double compounding aspect that's happening, right? And So do you think about, because you have this background in entrepreneurship and arts and policy, and as a touring drummer, you're the New York Economic Club, you're a young delegate of the American Council on Germany. I mean, you're a member of the Council for Relations. You have this really diverse educational background. You're a student of history. I mean, do you think that it's going to have a cultural impact? It's going to have a societal impact that we can't even foresee. Do you think we're at this cusp?
I do believe we're at a cusp, although anyone who looks back at history will see testimonials from people thinking that they're at the cusp, and so maybe we're just always at the cusp of things. I do feel that there are many, many, many things on trial these days when it comes to workforce development and so and future of work. And I put myself in that mix. What's on trial? Well, we look at the education systems that we have. Are we as specialized as we need to be? Should we be training from an early age folks just for a single function, a single job, or should we try to raise children and young adults to be slightly more varied in their pursuits? It's a mixed bag for me. I do believe that education should have an orientation around employment of some kind, and so not everybody has the privilege of just being a classics major and talking about Horace and Catullus. At some point you gotta learn a craft, a trade that has a transaction potential. However, I look at the American education system and I see a lot of customers. I see a lot of international customers. I see people from Europe. I see people from Asia. I see people from Africa, South America coming to learn here. I don't just believe that's because of the jobs they get afterwards, because actually, as it turns out, many of them don't get visas and have to go back. So they decide to come here for the education at some level. And it's hard to say why being slightly more varied is better than a hyper focus. But one thing is for sure, that today's challenges, we weren't given the solution set. There's no answers in the back of the book that you can turn towards and solve climate change or energy challenges, or there's no answer in the back of the book that you can solve deep tragic crises and wars between neighbors and countries. So you since you don't know the answers, you got to figure it out yourself, and probably that requires flexible thinking. And if anything, I believe that when you study not just the sciences but the arts, you become a slightly more flexible and open-minded thinker. So probably drifted from your core question a bit, but I'm a big believer in learning as much as you can about the past, and so that we can all have a better command of the future.
Yeah, or this combinatorial thinking, being exposed to a lot of different ideas and then looking at ways that you can combine them in different ways. So being very flexible in your thinking. I got you're definitely the kind of the poster child of flexible thinking because of the diversity of the things you're interested in your background. And it kind of reminds me of this Christensen sort of innovator's DNA, where you're doing questioning, you're constantly piloting, you're trying things, and you're doing constant association of diverse ideas, and you're networking with people who are different. Um, but the key is the counterfactual questioning, where you're looking at all of the alternative strategies, and you're going through this agile process, and it's that agility that's going to allow you to innovate as well, right? And I did this fireside with Vinod Khosla, and he was saying, your children are not going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Because a lot of those kind of capabilities are going to be supplanted.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? You're going to be focusing on other areas that you can be creative and be an amalgamation of all these different pieces. And do you think that? So how is this going to impact, your venture capitalist? How do you think it's going to impact your livelihood and what you're seeing and in venture capital? And maybe you can give some tips of, in totality, what are the different pieces you look for where you think, that's a team I got to beat a bet on. Perhaps that's more central, it sounds like, the talent that you see than even the technologies that they're involved in. So what are those kind of categories of buckets you look for where you say, you know what, I know this is going to go somewhere?
In simplest form, my job as a venture capitalist today is the same as it was for venture capitalists 50 years ago. Take $1 of some institution's hard-earned money and take that $1 and turn it into 10. And outsized return like that requires outsized or outlier thinking at some level. And so I'm very careful not to be too systematic in how I describe my investment thinking, because I'm not a prophet, I'm not an oracle. I don't know what the future is going to hold. All I can try to do is see the future before most other people. So you asked about the different heuristics that I apply. I generally think about investments with 4 T's: team, the traction, the total addressable market, and the timing. I'm a drummer. Timing is everything for a drummer. Timing is a big thing. Why now? So I will always apply those 4 T's to companies that I'm evaluating, and it's a helpful heuristic, not to predict the future, but to get a good sense of probability. Is this company onto something in a market that matters, that is appropriately suited around timing? And yeah, we could talk about certain things, certain areas where when I put it through that machine thinking, those 4 T's, where you come out with something that looks like it could turn $1 into 10. Yeah, and so happy anytime to talk shop about some of those thematic areas.
Yeah, or something that's transformational, right?
Yeah.
But then sometimes it's too early. I'm just thinking of Nikola Tesla, who wasn't able to commercialize a lot of his ideas, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Timing is everything. And I remember working on generative AI projects in 2017 in the music business, and you couldn't get an executive's attention when you showed them generative AI music, and that existed. We were doing pretty cool projects even then. And so timing alongside a team may be one of the greatest predictive variables of good outcomes. Even more than traction, and even more than the market size is this the right moment for this thing? Yeah.
You brought up music, and I've been keynoting a lot, and when Suno AI dropped last year, and it was so primitive. But now, or there's this new one, Udio, I played with it, and you can do a piece now like 15 minutes, something like
Yeah.
that. It is fully mastered.
Yeah.
That's incredible. This was thought to be impossible.
Yeah.
Where it generates the lyrics and the music and the style and generates graphics and the singer's voice um and people are always going, gee, that's they're
Yeah.
surprised, right? And even I
Yeah.
think musicians are surprised now.
They're surprised. They're not all terrified, which is assuring. The arts and technology, these are the same DNA. They're twins that are separated at birth. We look at AI and we look at music and we say, oh my God, these are competing with each other. This is crazy. But they actually share a very similar sensibility. And the best example I can give is from last week. I had the chance to speak with students at NYU's Tisch School Clive Davis Institute. In other words, some of the brightest young minds in music production. And a student, when asked about generative AI, is it an opportunity or is it a threat? Are you scared about it or are you optimistic? Didn't miss a beat. Said, "Oh, I believe this is such a cool technology. In fact, we just the other day in the studio created some generative AI music, and then we actually tried to mimic it and perform it in real life, and it created a really cool sound." And so you're starting to see the arts really embrace the technology and push themselves and their abilities and their audiences to new unforeseen heights.
So I'm going to ask one more question, but before I ask this question, I just want to summarize our conversation. We talked about inflection points in your life, and it's kind of remarkable from the drumming inspiration from your grandmother to the foreign relations to now into venture capital and in doing the fellowship. And we talked about the kind of the different themes that you invest in. We also talked about you're a distinguished graduate at the University of Oxford. You have an MBA, an AB, magna cum laude from Dartmouth, and an MPA from Harvard. And we talked about the fact that you belong to these different groups like the Council for Relations, the New York Economic Club, a young delegate, the American Council of Germany. And I alluded to the fact that you're a rising star. In fact, you're 2024 Rising Star on BC by Venture Capital Journal on the top BC Journal Business Insider. We talked about your VC journey from 406 Ventures, and you said it's really finding the deal that works, right? And having that aptitude to do that as a student fellow. Then you Bertelsmann Investments, where you got this ability to go to different countries and see what was happening for joining Alumni Ventures. But through all of this, you're weaving this entrepreneurship with arts and policy, and your time with the State Department, and how that really was a turning point for you as well. So this leads to the final question, and we got into maybe a little bit esoteric areas, including music and generative AI and the future of work. Taking all of these different elements together, what would be your recommendation, or maybe some questions that you want to throw to the audience that they can ponder when they leave this interview?
My best advice is to ignore advice. Let yourself be the narrator on your own story. And so many times I found myself in rooms among people that couldn't make sense of my story, wanted to tell my story in a different way, wanted to look at my experiences as a random, uncorrelated collection of passions as opposed to unified collections of a person. And I would not have done all those things if I had listened to advice or criticism from people. So my best advice is to ignore advice. Even though a resume shows your bright spot moments, there's been a lot of challenges and things to sort out on my side, like anyone. And so a lot of times you look at someone that pops up in an article and that you're tempted to ask them for advice, but my best advice is perhaps not to ignore the advice, but to calibrate and discount it appropriately. And that is the best I got. I'm every single day trying to do my work better, and that comes from what I said before, an acknowledgement that the job I have is a hard one to get. It's a very hard one to keep. It's also a very serious one where you're deploying capital, in some cases that belongs to people who earned it through very hard work and made great sacrifice. And so it's a sacred thing that you're helping manage. And so it's not one for sitting back and relaxing. It's one for dedication. It's one of great opportunity to meet Stephen, folks like yourself, and to sort of build a community of like-minded peers. But man, the thing I try to avoid is making it sound like the things I'm saying are advice that should be followed or listened to. I think you learn a lot more not following than following.
Well, Pete, I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I realized, I'm looking forward to spending my next visit to New York and spending some time with you, like a day where we can explore so many different topic areas and just have fun, right? Bouncing ideas around. So thank you again for coming in and sharing your insights with our audience.
Stephen, you're a luminary. You're someone who somehow can make a conversation not just insightful, but in a lot of ways meaningful and personal. And I appreciate that. It's a rare ability you have. And thank you very much for having me on board.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.